Professors, who's the dumbest student you've taught in school? Story 1. I wouldn't say dumb, but definitely baffling and annoying. She had somehow gotten all the way to college still believing that weirdly and creepily exaggerated coy little girl flirting would get her what she wanted, including with female faculty. It was cringy to see in action, literally tilting her head to the side, playing with her hair, pivoting her leg back and forth mannerisms combined with semi-childish speech patterns while glancing up through her eyelashes. Definitely, I'm only talking to this one in front of witnesses territory. She told me that she was reading and studying every night and still not making progress on tests and needed help. I explained how to make written study materials to help her absorb information better. She said she'd done that and reviewed the materials regularly but still wasn't seeing results. Genuinely concerned and puzzled, I asked her to bring me her materials for the next class period and we'd go over them to make sure they were accurate and useful. She agreed. Next class period rolls around, she announces with even more exaggerated mannerisms that you wouldn't know it. She was so frustrated with her score on her last test, returned before our earlier conversation, that she'd thrown her study materials into the trash in a fit of anger and they were all gone, almost as if they had never existed. I looked her in the eye and said, I think you should consider then that self-discipline may be playing a role in your grades in my class. She huffed and pouted in outrage, and I never saw her again. What makes me sad is that clearly someone, almost certainly her family, had taught her that these behaviors worked. No one sticks to a behavior that strongly unless she has had success with it. Yeah, the fact that she likely learned that behavior from home is sad because it is clearly going to do her no favors in the long run. But also, she's an adult, and it is probably good she learns that lesson now and hopefully will take steps to correct that behavior. If not, she may be in for a tough time. Story 2. I'm not the professor, but I did talk to her about this student at the time. I was taking an online class. Each week, we had to answer in a discussion board in our own words about whatever the topic was. The answers were all public to inspire discussion. I researched, took my time writing out the answers. Even though our names showed up, I still signed my name at the end of it. Usually an hour or two after I post my stuff, a classmate would post hers too. Without fail, she would copy and paste what I wrote and claim it as her answer too. It was clear she never bothered to read it either because she kept my name at the end of it. After seeing this happen over 2 weeks, I emailed our professor and voiced my complaint. She emailed me back and said it's already been noticed by her. The following week, the classmate was no longer in the class roster. I was always curious who would pay that kind of money just to steal answers and not bother to learn. She wasn't young either. We had profile pages. She was older than me by at least 20 years. It was just bizarre and dumb. Story 3. As a GA teaching freshman English, I had a couple instances of cheating that left me speechless. First, my university uses an online plagiarism checker, and the students know this. With one student, over half of his essay was copied from a website. He looked genuinely shocked when I called him out on it, and then told me that his mother wrote the paper for him. I explained that his mother writing his paper was also cheating. Then he asked if he could get credit for the half that wasn't from a website. Another time, the student had to analyze a movie showing how it used the hero's journey as plot structure. This was an easy assignment, seeing as how nearly every modern movie uses this structure. The student copied the Wikipedia summary of Aladdin word for word, and he denied doing it. He argued it was a coincidence that his entire essay was the exact same as Wikipedia's. You know, it was easier to get away with plagiarism back in my day because the internet was still early enough that they didn't have great tools to check on that stuff. But it shocks me when students try this crap these days. Like, you all grew up with this tech around you. Why do you think you can beat it? Story 4. A student once threatened to sue me over the definition of the terms necessary and sufficient that he had mixed up in an exam. No biggie to mix them up, actually, for a math major it might be. But loudly threatening to sue me over an age-old textbook definition in an exam review session was kind of stupid. It did entertain all other students who were present. Another student once requested letters of recommendation for 5 of the top 10 master's programs in Europe while being the second worst in his class of several hundred graduates. Story 5. I didn't have any particular dumb students, also not a professor, but a graduate teaching assistant, but I did mark one essay that began so eloquently with, "Are we born with intelligent?" Edit. As an addendum, because I still find the story hilarious, the second sentence was, How our cognitive is developed. One of my fellow PhD students marked an essay once which came in at 2 pages, it was a 6-page limit, and half of the essay, so 1 page, discussed Mowgli from the Disney animated version of The Jungle Book. The topic was developmental psychology. Story 6. Had lots of students from Saudi Arabia. They typically pushed boundaries, so I learned quickly to set boundaries and be firm/fair with everyone in the class. One guy didn't see the need to come to class much or do homework, and his grade suffered greatly. He came in one day and said, "I want a better grade. My family is the X's." I don't remember the name. But apparently they were wealthy and well-respected. I didn't care, and I reminded him of his lack of effort. He was peed, and he made some generic threats, but nothing specific I could call anyone about. I found out from the other Saudi students, most of which hated the guy, that he said "F it" during the last week and went home without taking any finals. Maybe he was more arrogant, but I'd say he was also a dumbbutt. I think we've all heard of someone trying to use their status and family as an excuse for a teacher to treat them better or give them a better grade. Frankly, I'm shocked more teachers don't just reply with, "Ooh, that is quite the prestigious family to come from. I would expect better work from someone with that background. Whatever will they think of your performance?" Story 7. I saw some amazingly bad attempts at plagiarism in my day. These included 1. Plagiarizing from an article in a journal the professor edited. This was a grad student. 2. Plagiarizing from the same source as another student in the same class. First hit on Google is not your friend. 3. Turning in a sophomore lit survey paper referring to a poet's use of hendecasyllabics. I have a doctoral degree, and I had to look that one up. Google the author's name plus hendecasyllabics, and there was the paper. Only thing the student contributed was her name. 4. When caught red-handed, insisting tearfully that she didn't plagiarize. Her roommate wrote that paper for her, and her roommate was the dirty plagiarist. I was literally speechless for a moment while I grappled with this line of reasoning. Bonus point. This was Miss hendecasyllabics. Story 8. History professor is talking about some expedition or something and mentions Antarctica, standing in front of a world map. Girl raises her hand, asks, "Excuse me, but where is Antarctica?" Professor stands there unable to answer for a few seconds, then raises his arm to the map and goes, "Right here," while running his hand under Antarctica and making exaggerated Vanna White motions. Girl goes, "Oh, okay. I was a little scared, more for the professor. He had that 'I'm severely underpaid' expression." Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 9. All she had to do to graduate was to show up to a seminar. I pointed out the importance of this as it was the last time this mandatory thing was being run and the last chance for her, having missed early opportunities, and I wouldn't run the class next year. Got an email saying she had a dentist appointment and missed it. She failed, couldn't get a degree, and had to come back 18 months later for it. Oh, that is really rough. I mean, I hate when college classes have stuff that is like, "Hey, I don't care how well you did all the rest of the class, if you miss this one thing, you fail." I get that it might be integral to the course, and giving students an opening to make stuff up like that isn't always feasible because then you might have 20 different makeup requests, but it still sucks crap. But this woman apparently missed multiple opportunities for this seminar, so sorry, that's on her. Story 10. Actually, one of my smartest kids in my class. Ethics, awareness of social norms, not so much. He sent me an email after the semester ended asking if I'd mind telling my next semester class that his digital textbook was available for sale. Oh, and that it's a PDF, so if multiple people want it, he can sell them all copies. I responded that I admire his entrepreneurial spirit, but it probably wasn't a good idea to solicit his professor's help in starting a piracy-based book-selling business. Story 11. Not a professor, but in my statistics class, a girl asked if changing the minus to a plus would change the answer. Not a negative to a positive, like she wasn't questioning how negatives worked. She sincerely wanted to know if changing from subtraction to addition would change the answer. To the professor's credit, she answered with a kind yes and only a slight pause. Story 12. The one who would regularly hand in essays which were obviously copy-pasted. They didn't bother to change the font or color of paragraphs that were lifted from other websites. They never argued or shared their opinion, but would ask vague questions such as, But what is the United States at the end of a lecture or tutorial that was about a legal decision? Story 13. A student in my economics class started his final essay with this. We are all familiar with the country Africa, yet at the same time we know little about them. All we know is that it is hot there. African Americans live there, and they are really poor. This begs the question, why is Africa that poor? It was just so jam-packed with stupid that I had to stop grading for 24 hours. Edit. For the record, this was indeed a college student. Wow, I'm reluctant to call someone stupid because there are all kinds of intelligence, and weighing them via a singular metric in one story seems completely unfair. And I won't say that the student was stupid, as they might have been really smart in other ways. What I will say is doing that little research into Africa and saying that about Africa was a stupid thing to do. A really, really stupid thing to do. Story 14. May or may not be dumb, but my friend and I went to her uncle's house, which had this piece of paper framed and put on the wall. It was a 0 out of 20 on a true or false quiz. Her uncle was a professor and was just too impressed by such an achievement that he had to put it in his home. Less than 1 in a million chance of doing that with random answers. Odds are 1 in 1,048,576. That's an impressive level of dumb. Story 15. I don't know if this qualifies as dumb or is closer to stupid, but I had a student who didn't show up for class regularly, and her grade was going to be a C, maybe a D, depending on her final exam. What made her dumb, however, was how she tried to cheat on the final exam. She reached down into her bag and took out her phone, put it on the desk, typed something into it, looked at the test, looked at her phone, looked back at her test, rechecked her phone, then answered whatever question she was looking up. Just to make sure, I let her do it one more time. I was watching her the whole time, and she was completely oblivious to it. She got an F. Story 16. One of my husband's colleagues said a kid came up to him after an exam and said, "I didn't know the answers to the questions you asked on the test, so I made up my own questions and answered them." The professor said, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and when I go to lunch, I'm going to tell all my friends." I'm not sure how to process that student's thinking. Like, there's a part of me that's like, that kid had to know that wasn't gonna work, right? But there's this other part of my brain that keeps going, is something about that brilliant? Like, something about that feels weirdly clever, but in a way I can't quite pin down. Story 17. In high school British Lit class, we had to do a paper on British author. One of my classmates wanted to do a paper on an African-American British author and frustratedly exclaimed to the entire library that she couldn't find any. I'm not sure she ever figured it out. Bonus, this was a senior honors English class. Story 18. I teach a class on the history of psychology. When covering the chapter on behaviorism and discussing the idea of its founder, John Watson, who was a determinist, did not believe in free will, a student asked me in the middle of class that if he was a determinist, why did he advocate free will in the Sherlock Holmes book? I was really taken aback by that one. Story 19. My sister is a French teacher, not a professor, so I'm not sure if this counts, but here goes. Everyone in the class had a fairly lengthy piece of French homework, and one student put the entire thing in Google Translate, but translated it to Spanish. I mean, what is Spanish if not French, but with sharper corners, am I right? I speak neither of these languages, so I have no idea if that's clever or not, but I stand by it. Now, give me some German language stuff, and Well, okay, I took it 20 years ago, so chances are I wouldn't do much better. Story 20. I was a student in this class, but after an entire chapter of going over the Civil War in a history class, our teacher, as a joke, said, "So, who won the Civil War?" A girl raised her hand and said, "The South," and he laughed until he realized she was serious, and she tried to defend it, saying, "What, we still have slaves, right?" Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.